I was out in the garage a few months ago, standing in front of my heavy wooden workbench. The air was thick with the smell of old motor oil and cut sawdust. I had a heavy cardboard box of old cast iron pipe fittings sitting on the concrete floor, and I needed to lift it up onto the bench to sort through them. For over 30 years, working the loading docks down at the freight warehouse right here in Knoxville, lifting a heavy box like that was a completely unconscious movement. I would just bend my knees, grab the cardboard flaps, and let my legs do the heavy work. My legs were always the engine that drove my life. I trusted my physical foundation completely. But that afternoon in the quiet of my own garage, when I bent down and gripped that box, the engine simply stalled out. I tried to drive my weight up through my heels, and my thighs just trembled under the strain. The power was completely gone. My legs felt hollow, like the dense muscle I had relied on for decades had been replaced by thin, fragile paper. I had to let go of the heavy box and lean against the wooden workbench, breathing hard, feeling a cold wave of realization wash over me. I was losing my physical foundation. I was shrinking. And the most terrifying part of that realization was that I had been eating massive amounts of protein trying to stop this exact thing from happening. I was eating 3 eggs every single morning. I was eating heavy portions of chicken and beef for dinner. I thought I was doing exactly what a man is supposed to do to keep his strength as he gets older, but my body was just ignoring the food. My daughter Megan is an occupational therapist. She spends her days in a clinic seeing older men and women who are dealing with this exact same devastating loss of physical independence. I told her about the incident with the box of pipe fittings when she came over to the house that weekend for Sunday dinner. We were sitting at the kitchen table, wrapping our hands around warm mugs of black coffee. She did not brush off my concerns or tell me I was just getting older. She sat me down and told me a hard truth that nobody in the medical field seems to want to explain to us plainly. She said that when we cross that threshold into our late 60s and 70s, our muscles develop a condition called anabolic resistance. It sounds like a complicated clinical term, but she explained it to me perfectly. It means your muscles become locked doors. You can eat all the eggs, all the chicken, and all the heavy steaks you want, but your aging digestive system cannot break them down effectively anymore, and your muscle fibers stubbornly refuse to let the protein inside to rebuild the tissue. That is exactly why so many older men complain that their legs still feel terribly thin and their balance still feels dangerously shaky no matter how much meat they put on their dinner plate. Our bodies just stop converting that ordinary animal protein into real, functional muscle. Megan told me I was trying to fuel a changed, older engine with the old type of heavy gas. I needed a completely different type of biological fuel. She told me about 5 specific seeds, not meat, not eggs, but seeds. She said researchers had been measuring senior muscle fibers under a microscope and were absolutely stunned by how quickly these specific seeds increased muscle protein synthesis, foot stability, and leg firmness. They expected traditional egg protein to dominate the comparison, but these seeds outperformed eggs in seniors by a massive margin. I am going to walk you through exactly what these 5 seeds are, how I prepare them in my own kitchen so my older stomach can actually use them, and how they brought the solid, heavy strength back to my legs. And I need you to stay with me for the last one because that final seed is the one that completely reversed the wasting in my calves and thighs. Let us start with the first major change I had to make in my kitchen. For my entire life, I thought a hot bowl of scrambled eggs was the ultimate, undisputed muscle food. I would eat eggs every morning thinking I was building armor for my legs, But Megan showed me a study from Cornell University that completely shattered my old beliefs. She introduced me to quinoa. Now, if you are an older man like me, you probably think quinoa is just some trendy grain that younger people eat cold in fancy salads. But it is actually a seed, and it contains something incredibly rare in the plant world. It has all 9 essential amino acids that your aging muscles desperately need. When you get older, your body becomes terrible at combining incomplete proteins on its own. You need the complete package delivered all at once. The protein molecules in quinoa are structured completely differently than egg protein. They are much smaller molecules that slip right through your intestinal walls easily. The research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that seniors were absorbing about 85% of the protein from quinoa, compared to only 60% of the protein from eggs. Quinoa even contains a natural compound called ecdysterone that acts like a gentle steroid in your body, pushing muscle growth without any dangerous side effects. But the real secret is how you prepare it to make it work for an older stomach. You cannot just boil it in a pot of plain water. I started taking a cup of raw quinoa and soaking it overnight in a glass bowl with warm water and a heavy splash of apple cider vinegar. That vinegar specifically breaks down a protective coating on the seed called saponin that usually blocks your protein absorption. The next morning, I rinse it out thoroughly in a metal strainer and cook it on the stove in a pot of thick bone broth. The bone broth adds natural collagen, making the amino acids incredibly bioavailable to my aging digestive system. I eat it hot, at least 140 degrees, because heating it changes the protein structure to make it even more digestible. And I crack a teaspoon of black pepper right over the top, because the piperine in the pepper helps the gut grab onto those amino acids before they just pass through. I eat that warm bowl about 2 hours after I wake up, when my muscles are depleted and ready to soak up protein like a dry sponge. I noticed within just a few weeks that the heavy, tired, dragging feeling I used to get in my thighs when I walked up the steep driveway to get the mail was completely gone. The second major change was about addressing the hormones that actually build the muscle. When I was 30 years old and working on the heavy loading dock, I could work a brutal 12-hour shift, sleep for 6 hours, and wake up ready to do it all over again. My body repaired itself automatically. But as we age, the master hormones that build and repair our muscle, specifically testosterone and growth hormone, just plummet. Without them, trying to rebuild the strength in your legs feels like trying to build a solid brick wall without any mortar. I always assumed you needed dangerous pharmaceutical interventions to fix a problem like that. But Megan showed me the research on raw pumpkin seeds. A small handful of these green seeds contains an absolutely massive amount of zinc, magnesium, and iron, in the exact biological ratios our older bodies need to naturally produce those missing hormones. German researchers found that men over 70 who ate just 3 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds daily increased their free testosterone levels by 23% in just 8 weeks, and their muscle mass increased right along with it. The catch is that you cannot just eat them by the handful straight out of a plastic bag. Raw pumpkin seeds have natural enzyme inhibitors that actively block protein digestion. You have to roast them at 300 degrees or soak them. I started taking those raw seeds out to the garage where I keep an old electric coffee grinder. I grind them down into a fine pale green powder. Grinding them massively increases the surface area, so my digestive system does not have to work hard at all to access the protein. Then I mix 2 tablespoons of that green powder into my morning bowl of oatmeal with a heavy dash of cinnamon to keep my blood sugar stable. And here's a critical, unbreakable rule Megan taught me. You can never eat pumpkin seeds with dairy products. The calcium in milk or yogurt completely blocks your body from absorbing the vital zinc. I make sure to eat my oatmeal with water. A good buddy of mine from the warehouse days, a guy named Frank, was struggling with terrible muscle recovery. He would do some light yard work on a Saturday afternoon and be too stiff and sore to even get out of his recliner on Sunday. I told him about grinding the pumpkin seeds. He started putting the powder in his morning bowl. A month later, he stopped me at the hardware store and told me he was waking up feeling completely recovered, not broken. The specific amino acids in those seeds, tryptophan and arginine, which eggs barely contain, were directly triggering his pituitary gland to release more growth hormone while he was in deep sleep. The third seed was something I had never even heard of before we started this journey: hemp seeds. When Megan brought a sealed bag of them over to the house, I looked at her like she was crazy. I am an old school guy from Tennessee, and hemp was not something we considered food. But she sat down and explained the pure biology of it. She told me that hemp seeds contain a protein density that puts beef, chicken, and fish to absolute shame. Just 3 tablespoons hold a whopping 10 grams of complete protein. But the real reason they are so incredibly vital for men over 70 is the physical structure of that protein. 65% of the protein inside a hemp seed is a rare protein called edestan. Edestan is almost biologically identical to the proteins that already exist inside your own blood plasma. When you eat it, your aging body recognizes it instantly. It does not have to go through the exhausting, complicated digestion process that a heavy piece of meat requires, a process that often fails in older adults anyway. The hemp protein goes straight into your bloodstream and shuttles right down to your leg muscles. Canadian researchers actually found that hemp protein increased muscle thickness in seniors by 35% more than whey protein. I started eating 4 tablespoons of raw hemp seeds spread out over the course of my day. You have to be careful because you can never heat them above 100 degrees. The heat destroys the delicate fatty acids and denatures the powerful proteins. I sprinkle 1 spoonful over my breakfast right when I wake up to stop the muscle breakdown from the long night. I take another spoonful before I go out to work in the yard, 1 when I finish my work to jumpstart my recovery, and 1 right before I go to sleep to provide repair materials overnight. Hemp seeds have a perfect 3-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, which drastically reduces the chronic inflammation that actively blocks muscle growth in older bodies. It feels exactly like lubricating a rusty gear. I noticed that my knees and my ankles stopped aching when I carried heavy bags of groceries up the wooden porch steps. The chlorophyll in the hemp seeds helps deliver oxygen deep into the muscle tissues, which became obvious when my legs stopped feeling suffocated, heavy, and dead after a long walk. We are getting very close to the absolute most important seed on this list, the one that truly changed my physical foundation forever. But before we get to that final seed, we need to talk about the silent, invisible muscle killer that happens in the quiet hours between our meals. When you are 73 years old, you simply cannot eat massive, heavy meals every 3 hours like a young competitive bodybuilder. Our stomachs simply cannot handle that kind of volume anymore. But when we go long periods of time without eating, our blood amino acid levels crash hard, and our bodies panic and start cannibalizing our own leg muscles just for energy. That catabolic breakdown is exactly what makes our calves shrink from the inside out. My wife Linda was the one who actually found the practical solution to this problem. She came home from the grocery store with a bag of chia seeds. These are tiny, hard black seeds that look a lot like coarse black pepper, but when you put them in a liquid, they do something absolutely incredible. They expand to 12 times their normal size and create a thick, slow-release protein gel. Linda started mixing 2 tablespoons of chia seeds into a glass of coconut water and letting it sit on the kitchen counter for exactly 20 minutes. It turns into a thick kind of pudding. When you eat that specific gel, it coats the inside of your intestinal walls and releases its protein incredibly slowly, feeding your muscles continuously for up to 6 straight hours. Mexican researchers actually discovered that seniors who consumed chia seeds maintained perfectly stable blood amino acid levels all day long, while people who ate eggs experienced terrible spikes and crashes that starved their muscles. I started eating a small bowl of that chia pudding right in the middle of the afternoon between lunch and dinner. It stopped that afternoon energy crash completely. Instead of my body starving and eating its own muscle tissue for fuel, it had a steady, slow drip of amino acids, keeping the foundation strong and secure. The calcium in those tiny seeds is 5 times higher than what you get in milk, which works directly with the protein to improve muscle contractions and stop the painful cramping that used to wake me up in the middle of the night. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the impact of the final seed. This is the one that completely reversed the wasting in my legs and gave me my independence back. Flax seeds. If you only take one single thing away from my story today, let it be this one fact. As we age, our bodies produce a destructive enzyme that actively searches out and breaks down whatever testosterone and growth hormone we have left in our aging systems. It is a biological sabotage happening inside you right now. But Japanese scientists discovered that flax seeds contain incredibly powerful compounds called lignans. These specific lignans physically block that destructive enzyme from doing its job. They stop the sabotage dead in its tracks. They actually allow your body to keep and use the muscle-building hormones of a man 30 years younger without needing any pharmaceutical intervention. The University of Tokyo did a study where men over 75 who consumed ground flax seeds gained more muscle in 3 months than guys who spent 6 months lifting weights and eating egg protein. When Megan sat at my table and explained this to me, I was deeply skeptical. But I was tired of feeling weak, and I was desperate enough to try it. There is a very specific, unbreakable rule you have to follow to make this work, though. If you eat whole flax seeds, they pass right through your digestive system completely undigested, like small pebbles. You absorb absolutely nothing. You must grind them fresh every single morning. I take 2 tablespoons of fresh flax seeds, put them in my electric coffee grinder until they turn into a fine meal, and then I mix them into a small glass of warm water. I let that mixture sit for exactly 10 minutes so it forms a protective gel, and I drink it immediately on a completely empty stomach first thing in the morning when I wake up. That specific time of morning is when cortisol, the stress hormone that violently breaks down muscle tissue, is at its absolute highest peak. The lignans in the flax seed gel intercept that destructive cortisol and somehow convert it into a powerful signal to build muscle instead. Within just a month of doing this every single morning, the physical change in my legs was absolutely undeniable. The soft, paper-thin feeling in my thighs was completely gone. When I pressed my hand against my thigh, I felt dense, firm, heavy muscle pushing right back against my palm. The hollow, sunken look in my calves filled in with solid tissue. I walked out to the garage last week. That same heavy cardboard box of cast iron pipe fittings was sitting on the concrete floor in the exact spot where I had left it months ago. I stood over it. I took a deep breath, bent my knees, grabbed the cardboard flaps with both hands, and drove my weight aggressively up through my heels. My legs did not shake. They did not tremble even a fraction of an inch. They felt like solid, deeply rooted oak pillars. The engine was running again, with more power than I had felt in a decade. The heavy box came right up off the floor and onto the wooden workbench in one smooth, confident, unbroken motion. I stood there in the quiet garage, feeling the residual tension in my calves and the steady beating of my heart, and I realized with a profound sense of relief that I had my independence back. We do not have to accept weakness just because we have a few gray hairs and some lines on our faces. We do not have to watch our bodies shrink away into nothing and tell ourselves that it is just a normal, unavoidable part of aging. The ordinary rules of meat and eggs simply do not apply to our changing bodies anymore. We need the raw, highly concentrated, highly absorbable power that nature hides inside these specific seeds. We need the slow, steady, continuous biological reconstruction that they provide to an older frame. Stop trying to force a broken, outdated system to work. Start grinding your pumpkin seeds into a powder. Start soaking your chia and your quinoa until they are ready for your stomach. And start your morning with freshly ground flax. Protect your legs with everything you have, because they are the only things that carry your freedom and your dignity through this world. I am going to keep walking my steep driveway every single morning, feeling the solid, heavy ground under my boots, and I am going to keep sharing the honest truth about what actually works for men like us. I will be right here,